Although not everybody has registered yet, due from time constraints, we will do the kickoff now. Good morning. My name is Hans Gijssen. I'm the Regional Manager in Middle East and Africa with Invigors. And on behalf of Invigors and the Alta Group, I welcome all our delegates here in our venue in Dubai, as well from their homes or offices all over the globe. And of course, welcome back to all our delegates who attended previous editions of the Middle East Leasing Summit here in Dubai, organized by Duxus. It's a real pleasure and honor to welcome all of you and host this Lease Conference, the first Lease Conference since Duxus had their 5th Leasing Summit in January 2019. But let's go back to that moment. After that moment, Duxus decided to stop arranging these events in the Middle East. When this became public, a number of the people who attended these summits regularly approached Raphael and myself to take over the Duxus role and organize the Lease Conference, as there still was and is a need to have an event like this. We sat down and it became clear that we wanted to organize this event. One of the things we discussed was that the conference should have an overall theme. We agreed that "Be Prepared for Tomorrow" would be an excellent idea to have as an overall theme. And bear in mind, we are still talking about early 2019. Who could have thought that this theme would become so current in the next months to come? All of a sudden, the whole world needed to change in all of its ways of working and thinking. The year 2020 was a year like no other. We faced challenges and embraced new ways of doing business, and we learned that there is no substitution for connecting with each other. In a year like no other, the world has needed technology as never before, and asset firms are no exception. With offices and branches shutting down and staff switching to work from home, digitalization has played a critical role in easing the pressure and keeping services up and running throughout the COVID-19 pandemic. In some cases, the crisis helped accelerate the pace of digitalization, as customers jammed the phone lines and a greater proportion of business moved online. More asset providers rushed to automate their processes. A number of people already told that 2030 had arrived in 2020. We, as the hosts of this event, also were faced with this different way of working. Because of having the traditional in-person conferences, we now have organized a hybrid conference after having postponed the conference twice. With different speakers also in person as well as virtual, and topics at our conference, we want to show how this crisis affected our ways of working and how we need to move forward, and of course how we went through the phases from the old way of working to the new way of working. Also, what impact this had on the developments of new products and services, both in the equipment leasing industry as well as the automotive mobility industry. In addition to that, we also pay attention to important changes in legislations with key experts, also involved in drafting the new leasing laws as well as the secure transactions law. We are very pleased to have an international panel of speakers, all of them experts in her or his domain, and we are looking forward to learning from them. Invigors EMEA and the Alta Group are not hosting events. Invigors and EMEA and the Alta Group host events like this to start new conversations, collaborations and inspirations, and we hope that your new connections will lead into so much more interactionable collaborations. I hope that at the end of this event you walk away with at least one new contact or takeaway from today's and tomorrow's session for many more beautiful things to come. And before handing over the mic to the chairman of the next 2 days, I want to thank you for your attendance and participation, and I want to thank one person in particular who has done a lot of work to make this conference happen. Unfortunately, she could not attend in person, but she is attending this conference now online in Miami, USA, our Catherine Foster, despite the 9 hours time difference. Catherine, thank you very, very much for all the hard and challenging work that you have done. I hope and expect that you will have an interesting and pleasant conference, and please welcome our chairman for the next 2 days, my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Raphael Castillo-Triano. Raphael, the floor is yours.
welcome everyone. Coming here to Dubai, and this is one of the reasons why we say yes when everyone wanted us to continue, is because when you have been, as I am, in love with the leasing business for over 39 years, you realize that leasing was born here in the Middle East. And then when leasing has been born here, we need to take a view of the perspective, not only in terms of time, but also in terms of space. I believe that Dubai nowadays, and I encourage you to, if you have time, to go and visit the Dubai Expo conference, will show how this particular area of the world is becoming a very important hub for emerging markets. I forgot to mention that that's my role in the Alta Group. I am the CEO for emerging markets. I started being the CEO for Latin America, but we realize that the business requires much more than only a continental view. And the interesting thing of this is that everything that was learned here, first moments in the city of Uruk, the first evidence about leasing, written contracts in stone that are currently in exhibition in the Metropolitan Museum of New York, they show part of the legacy of what leasing is today. And then the practice of Ijara was exactly what Mr. Booth and Mr. Henry Schoenfeld copied in the 1950s when they founded the United States Leasing Corporation, which was the beginning of the modern leasing. It's the beginning of how the United States currently has 60% of capital formation driven by the leasing business. And again, coming back here. So I think that the time has come for us to capitalize on that. As Hans has mentioned, we are in challenging times. So we certainly need to learn a little bit how to manage technology. It's not easy. Sometimes we tend to exaggerate our tendency in technology and left behind the human factor. Sometimes it goes the other way around. We simply reject any development in technology. So this is what these 2 days are going to be about. And I would encourage you to be very active. Now that you take the effort of coming here, feel free to, not exactly interrupt, but ask questions when the time has come. As chairman, I have a very unpopular task, which is reminding people about their time left. So I ask for a help here. I know that I have left 2 minutes, which probably we are going to use for the benefit of the next speaker, which is an honor for us to present because he's the chairman of the Lease Europe, the European Leasing Association. He's going to talk a little bit what the Leasing Association is all about. And one of our aims in the last several years have been encouraging the players in the Middle East to create their own leasing association. In my personal experience, when I started the leasing business in South America, in Colombia, we achieved the development of the industry thanks to the creation of a leasing association. And I think that this is one of the main steps that we need to be taken, besides, of course, the legal enhancement that we are going to discuss later on today. So, allow me to introduce Monsieur Patrick Besseler, who is the current chairman of Lease Europe. He's the global head of ING Lease and has been for more than 30 years very active in the European leasing industry. He has made big achievements with ING Lease, mixing exactly the embracement of digital technologies with the long tradition that the leasing industry has in an organization like ING that has been in business for many years. His personal purpose in life is building a stairway to heaven together. So I hope that you will be able to join him in that purpose. So allow me to pass the floor to Monsieur Patrick Besseler, who is remote. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Happy and thank you for the invitation this morning. Happy to share my view on the challenges we face as an industry looking forward. But first of all, permit me, I would like to say a word about my own organization, ING Lease and Lease Europe, the sector federation of which I am the chairman for the moment. ING Lease is active in 6 European countries, and we're active in financial leasing, equipment leasing in all countries, and real estate leasing in some. And after review of our business portfolio after the last financial crisis, we decided to reduce our footprint to markets where leasing would be supportive for ING Bank, so in the countries ING was active in business banking. This explains the nature of our offer in the respective countries. We offer equipment leasing in all countries we are active in, as I said, real estate in some. In all countries we offer mid-tickets, in some small tickets, and in other also big tickets. And it's a B2B business, as you know, so we are serving as well the smaller companies, the mid-corps as the corps. The yearly production is around 3.5 billion euro. This amounts into a portfolio of 9.5 billion, and we have 165,000 contracts in portfolio to manage. Then a word about Lease Europe. Lease Europe is, as you may know, is the European sector federation representing the leasing and automotive rental activity and companies. We have been founded in 72. It's a federation, it's a big federation, 45 national federations, because our members are the national federations who are representing the local leasing sector, 45 federations for 33 countries, and all lessors are represented. We have bank-owned, we have captives, and we have independents, offering all types of leasing products. And yeah, we are very relevant as we cover 92% of the European leasing market. Heard about the mission? Well, it's obvious. A sector federation is there to represent and promote the interests of its members. But we try to do more, and that's why we are organized around 5 pillars. It's not only about lobbying, it's also about doing research and statistics. It's also a platform we offer to all members and the members of the members to connect, to think together, to discuss, to reflect on what's going on. It's also about communication internally, but also externally to stakeholders. And we also allow for what we call associate members, that are parties, companies who are related to leasing, who are connected to the leasing ecosystem, but which are not a lessor, but it can be interesting. And as the chairman said in the introduction, this is very important to grow as a sector. Having a sector federation is a organization, is where you can share ideas, exchange, and help each other progressing in your domain. So I can only recommend. Also a few words on the leasing activity in Europe. Well, first of all, if we look back for the longer period, we see that year on year, leasing has been growing at the pace and a growth rate which is structurally higher than the growth rate of the gross the GDP. So this means that leasing becomes more and more important as a way of financing, funding, capital formation in Europe, and this is positive. Of course, this growth rate has been interrupted a few times, and it was always related with a moment of crisis, the financial crisis 2009, but also the COVID crisis 2019-20, and this has had obviously a clear impact on the volumes generated in 2020. We have originated a counter value of 352 billion euro for new assets, which is still very considerable. But if you look, and I have drawn on the graph on the right, two axes, and you see on the horizontal axis the decrease of the different type of assets leased during 2020, and well, depending on the type of assets, we had for equipment, well, -8%, but for real estate it was a decrease of more than 20%. But what you see, and that's very positive, on the vertical axis, this shows the growth rate, the first half year 2021 compared to the same period 2020. There's a clear rebound and a spectacular rebound for all asset types. So we are back in game. I think, yeah, we recovered quite well from this COVID crisis. In leasing in particular, but you may say the whole European economy has shown a very, very good resilience after COVID. And I think, yeah, like in many leasing markets, also the European market, it are passenger cars and commercial vehicles, so trucks and vans, who are dominating the dominating assets. 2/3 in value of the assets are leased for assets, yeah, what we say with wheels. So that was about, I would say, the introduction. And in the next phase of part of my presentation, I would like to share with you some insights on what I call the dynamics of the lease market, because it's important to know, to understand the dynamics, because if we want to prepare ourselves for tomorrow, you need to know and to make an analysis of what is happening in this world. And I have identified four different drivers. The first driver is the customer needs that are shifting. And what do we see? And this may be important to say, my analysis is an analysis from a European perspective. It could be that the trends I share with you are not yet visible in your country, but it will come. It will come. So first of all, we see more and more that people are looking for convenience in the way they transact. People are looking for more transparency in their product offering. They are looking for financing that is integrated in their customer journey. They go to the car dealer shop, and at this very moment, they want also to have a view on how can I finance this car? How can I lease this car? Can I get additional services to use this car? So this is a very important evolution. And they are more and more looking to types of financing that really fit to the nature of the assets they want to finance. Second, we see more and more circular models popping up, new models where services are bundled, where ownership is shared. We see an increasing interest for pay-per-use or subscription models. It's the Netflix model who is also being introduced in the business segment, the B2B segment. We see more and more requests where suppliers ask to take into account the life cycle of the assets, into the funding proposal, and they are even willing to take back the asset at the end of the contract or the life cycle and recycle it. So all new trends we didn't see well 5 or 10 years ago. And finally, we see that more and more solutions are offered in a global way. I'm convinced, because if you look to those needs, it's all are more or less related with a in-depth knowledge of the assets. And I think, yeah, leasing companies, I would say by design, that's one of their expertise. So I think that all those trends will offer real opportunities for the sector to develop further. So I say the first driver is for me, I perceive it as very positive. The second one, well, I think not a surprise, the consequences of digitization. Since Moore's law has been introduced, and Moore's law, you all know, says that basically the capacity of computers is developing at an exponential rate, but this has a huge impact on every one of us. So we know that due to this, we know that all developments are going increasingly fast, and as a consequence, as organizations, we have adapted to this pace accordingly. In all markets, there are a few big volume players and a lot of small niche players. Everything which is in between has no future. That's important for us to recognize. Transactions are more and more generated on platforms. Those platforms generate huge volumes of data about customers, data about transactions, and are stored and analyzed, which are used to understand and approach the customer. The whole world and economic actors become connected. And yeah, this creates a lot of change, and whether those changes will become a threat or an opportunity will depend on the ability of each individual lessor to adapt. Some will be winners, some will be losers. It's up to us to be very vigilant to see how to adopt and adapt. A third driver has to do with climate change and the trend towards greenification of the whole world, also the economic world. The whole world, as we know, is becoming more and more eco-conscious. There's a strong focus on renewable energy. The assets to generate those renewable energy have to be financed. And I think that leasing can be a very interesting way to finance that type of assets. We talk about windmills, we talk about solar panels. So yeah, I can say already my company, we have a nice portfolio of that type of assets originated. Next, we go to CO2 neutrality in mobility. We all know and see the shift, which is going increasingly fast from the traditional combustion engine towards the electric vehicle, hybrid vehicles. Yeah, and as we have seen, cars, vans, and trucks are the most leased assets. So yeah, this will have a huge impact on our portfolio mix. But also this means that we have to build up expertise in those domains. So we have to learn about the life cycle of those cars. Nice challenge for all leasing companies who are active in automotive. And I think almost all are active in this domain. And as an owner, you will have a responsibility to recycle and to manage the second life of the asset. Again, I think a changing environment, which will create threats and opportunities. And just like the conclusion with respect to the second driver, It will depend on the ability of each individual lessor to turn this into an opportunity or not. And the fourth and last driver is about regulation. The last years, we have been confronted with a massive increase of the number of rules we have to comply with in a lot of different domains. And well, I have drawn a few of those on the slides. I will not go into detail. But what's true, that is, some of those apply to all lessors, some only to few of the lessors, especially the bank-related lessors. Some will have a direct impact on the way we have to act. Some will have an indirect impact on the way we have to behave. But what is the consequence of this? Well, I see two consequences. First of all, more regulation means higher regulatory costs for us. We need to comply with all those regulations, so this will have an impact on our expenses. But as not all leasing companies are hit in the same way or impacted in the same way, this will create an unlevel playing field amongst lessors in the domain of regulation. And so I think this will trigger movements in the setting of the landscape, the leasing landscape, the coming years. For me, well, it's good to regulate from time to time some things, but it's negative, I think, because the way we have to implement is a way that will increase our expenses, so our profitability will be hit by all those measures. So this is clearly a negative trend. So needless to say that the changing customer needs, the consequences of digitization, the trend towards greenification, and the increasing regulation will change the context in which we have to work as leasing players. And yeah, as forward-looking leaders, we need to assess what this means for us and how we should adapt in order to stay future-proof. And starting from our current position, and I have for everyone, you can draw the star on this, I would say, this map, where you say, on the one hand, what is the degree of product service I offer? Do I have a narrow or a broad scope? And what is the complexity of my value chain? I think everyone can put on this chart the position of his company. But this is the as is. And starting from our current position, I think we need to think about how should we reposition. Well, are we okay in the positioning, or should we reposition given the new context which we have in view? And yeah, depending on our current strengths and weaknesses, we will have to make choices. Will we join forces with other players and become part of a consolidation? Will we break up our value chain and outsource parts we are not familiar with or for which we don't have sufficient critical scale? Or will we focus on a specific domain and become specialist in a specific niche? So all choices to be made. And next to this, be aware of the new players, the digital players, the fintechs without legacy, who are also trying to pick the cherries of our cake. So very important decisions to be made in the years coming ahead. And it's not only about the strategic repositioning of our organization. No, I think that also the way of working will fundamentally change. If in the past it was about avoiding competition, in the new normal, it will be about channel competition and transparency. If in the past it was about protecting systems, in the new normal, it will be about allowing connectivity, connect with customers, connect with suppliers, but probably also connect with our traditional competitors. And traditionally, we try to create value on our own. In the future, I'm convinced that it will be about generating value together. And finally, and this is directly due to COVID, before COVID, we were all working at the office. In the post-COVID period, we will go for a hybrid model where staff is working partly from the office and partly from home. So you see all trends which we recognize already today and which will force us to change the way of working. And yeah, this creates a new context, this creates dynamic, and it's up to us to make the right choices, to be prepared for tomorrow. And that's, I think, what's nice in life. Life is not something static, it's something dynamic. This gives you oxygen, but for some, it will be a threat, for others, an opportunity. Thank you. Happy to.
I am very glad and happy with you because you gave us some time left for some questions. And I would like to encourage the audience to ask questions because I think that it is a very rich field. Let me start by the first question, if I may. You are part of a bank organization, and you made a very important point here, which is that we lessors need to focus in our business in being increasingly dedicated to manage assets. In my past life, the leasing business was more pastime of a bank. The collateral was something that we gave for granted, but we never pay attention to the asset specifically. Now with the new trends that you are describing, it seems that assets become the first priority. And this is a very indiscreet question, so you are free to plead the Fifth Amendment of the US Constitution if you want to answer, but when you live in a bank environment, how can you transform the culture of the bankers to allow you to become an expert in managing assets? That's my question.
Rafael, you put really the needle where you have to put it. That's my biggest challenge, very honestly and very openly. Daily, I've started as a salesman, and so I had to convince my customers. Now I have to convince my colleagues what we have to do. And that's a challenge. That's not always easy because, as a leasing company, being part of a bank, we need to be humble also. If you compare our portfolio size with the size of, the balance sheet of the bank, we talk about a few percentages. So this is a very difficult debate, and we need to balance between bank priorities and doing good, or what we have to do for doing good for staying future-proof as a leasing company, being part of a bank. So my personal opinion, and that's my personal opinion, that is that in the coming years, I think we will see a reshuffle of the portfolios of banks. And leasing will be a difficult one. On the one hand, leasing is a very attractive product for banks because it gives a good cover. It gives nice returns on equities. Your risk-weighted assets are relatively lower than for plain vanilla lending. So it's very attractive. It's a defensive product. It's a profitable product. But on the other hand, it's a little bit a different animal in the bank. It's also about managing this ownership. It's not like a loan where you offer some money, you put money on an account, and you hope that your customer is paying back. No, there's an extra dimension. We need to manage this ownership, and this is done on different tooling. So yeah, it's a difficult one.
Well, thank you very much.
Is this an answer, Rafael?
I think that you are giving us a very good food for thought. But you are right. I mean, it's a very honest answer, because this is a challenge that we all face, without any doubt. I don't know if there is any other question from the audience, or I just shoot the final question, which is about regulation. We are going to talk a little bit about the leasing law and the lack of, or the need of certain regulations here to basically funnel the business where it needs to go. In Europe, you are experiencing exactly the opposite tendency, which is over-regulation. There is extreme regulation. So in your 30 plus years of experience, what is the fair point, the right middle point in terms of regulation? What will be your advice to all the players now, especially for